Before you watch this video, I hope you will watch part 1 of this video. I'll leave a link to it in the description box. I don't want to go over all the things that I talked about in the last video. What we're going to be looking at now is Daniel chapter 12. And Daniel chapter 12 actually expands on that last 3.5 years of the 70th week of Daniel. Daniel was given a prophecy from God by the angel Gabriel that talked about 70 groups of 7 years, 490 years, sabbatical years, which is something Jews would resonate with. They would understand this. That Daniel chapter 12 picks up right around the time of the abomination. It's going to describe this last 3.5 years, this last part of Daniel's 70th week. And you go, well, how can you know that? Well, because Daniel 12 is going to tell us that this what's happening during this time is going to be last a time times and half a time, and that's 3.5 years. So let's start reading Daniel 12, verse 1. Now, at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise, and there will be a time of distress, such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who's found in the book, will be rescued. Okay, and I just want to stop right there. Let's just take a look at this. Now, at that time, Michael, the great prince, will arise. Okay, so Michael is the prince who is over God's people, and spiritual princes who rule over them, like the prince of Persia who withstood Gabriel was, it's like we would call the guardian of that country. So Michael is the angel that's assigned to Israel. And it talks about at that time Michael will arise. Okay, at what time? At what time will Michael arise? Well, I'm going to tell you that it's right around the time of the abomination, okay? The abomination of desolation, when that takes place. Now we're going to read the details about what happens when Michael arises. There's going to be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. It'll be a time of terrible distress, the worst that any, Israel could ever imagine. Well, we know that's going to take place during the last 3.5 years of that 70th week of Daniel. Talking about the time of the end, okay? Okay, it's over the course of what we're going to learn are times, and half a time. Okay? So this is 1, this is 2, and this is a half. And you add them together, and you get 3.5. Okay, 3.5 years. Times, and half a time. It's going to be the worst time in Israel's history. And we know that Jesus said the same thing in Matthew 24. So I want to just skip right down to verse 6 of Daniel 12. And someone said to the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the stream, how long will it be until the end of these wonders? That is, till the end of this time. And I heard the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the stream as he raised his right hand and his left toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for a time, times, and half a time, and as soon as they finish smashing the power of the holy people, all these events will be completed. There is a man there who's dressed in linen that Daniel has already seen in a previous chapter, that I believe is a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ. And we see this man again in Revelation chapter 10. But I'm not going to get into that right now. This man who raises his right hand and his left toward heaven and swears by God, it's going to be for a time, times, and half a time. 3.5 years. Just before the last half of the 70th week of Daniel begins, that last 3.5 years, Michael will arise or stand up. Where do we read about that in the Bible? Okay, Michael is going to stand up. Michael isn't mentioned very, very often in Scripture. I think it's a total of 3 times. Revelation 12, 7 through 9 says this, and there was war in heaven, Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon. And the dragon and his angels waged war, and they did not prevail, and there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. And he was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So what happens is Michael stands up and he initiates a war in heaven. And after this war is over, Satan and his angels are going to be cast to the earth. And that's when the really bad times start. Worse trouble than they have ever been in, ever in their whole entire existence. Revelation 12, the last half of verse 12 and 13. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you with great wrath, knowing that he has only a short time. And when the dragon saw that he was thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. Daniel 12:1, the last half. And there'll be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time your people, everyone found written in the book, will be rescued. All right, so there's going to be a terrible time that happens after Michael initiates this war in heaven. Satan is going to be cast to the earth. And right after that, there's going to be 3.5 years of the worst time that God's people could ever imagine. The dragon is going to persecute the remnant of Israel. But what we learn here is that those who have their name written in the book are going to be rescued. Okay, so there is going to be a rescue that happens. Where do we read about this rescue of this group of people that Satan is going to persecute? Okay, we read about them in Revelation chapter 12, verse 14. But the 2 wings of the great eagle were given to the woman so that she could fly into the wilderness to her place where she was nourished for a time, times, and half a time. Well, there's that phrase again, time, times, and half a time. The remnant of Israel, who is personified by this woman here, is given the 2 wings of a great eagle. In, I think it's Exodus 19, I could be wrong about that, but God says that when he delivered the nation of Israel, it was on the wings of eagles. It was his deliverance for them. He delivered the people, the children of Israel, personally through the pillar of cloud, the angel of the Lord, who is God, who is in the pillar of cloud and fire, that led the children of Israel out of Egypt. It's God that's being referred to here symbolically. The wings of the great eagle are not, us airlifting, not the United States airlifting people. I don't know of any plan that we have for that. But I do know that God takes responsibility for delivering his people. Let's read about this more in Zechariah 13, verses 8 through 9. And it will come about in all the land, declares the Lord, that 2 parts in it will be cut off and perish. Okay, that sounds like a really bad time for Israel, that 2/3 of them are going to die. But the 1/3 will be left in it. And I will bring the 3rd part through the fire, refine them as silver is refined, and test them as gold is tested. And they will call on my name, and I will answer them. I will say, they are my people, and they will say, the Lord is my God. That's this group of people who's going to be fleeing into the wilderness during this last times, and half a time, 1,260 days. And God, and I believe through Christ, is going to lead them into the wilderness. Zechariah 14, verses 4 and 5. This is a passage that almost everybody universally puts at the end when Christ returns at the second coming. Because of this idea that we've been handed, it's a package that we've been handed as far as eschatology goes, that says that Christ's visible return at the end is the only time that he is going to actually come to earth. Revelation doesn't show that at all. And there are other Old Testament passages, like the one we're going to be looking at, that actually dovetail with passages in Revelation that say that Christ is going to be the one who actually comes to Israel at the time of the abomination and personally delivers them. This is the passage that refers to that, and there are other places where I've talked about this, but it's opening Mary Poppins' carpet bag. Once you pull something out, all of a sudden there's this greater understanding, much more passages, more threads of scripture that you can follow that are amazing. Okay, and to me, this is one of the hallmarks of when we've found something in the Bible that's probably where you're on the right path, is it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and pretty soon it's really hard to even hold it all in your mind. Okay, this passage in Zechariah 14, you're going, which one is she talking about? Just cut to the chase. Okay, talks about when Jesus comes back to the Mount of Olives. Remember, Jesus left from the Mount of Olives. He's going to come back to the Mount of Olives. And it's not at the end. It's when he delivers his people, the remnant of Israel. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives will be split in its middle from east to west, forming a very large valley. And half of the mountain will move toward the north, and the other half toward the south. And you will flee by the valley of my mountains. For the valley of the mountains will reach Azel. Yes, you will flee just as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. And then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. Okay, so we're going to take a look at then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him in just a minute, because there's another way that could be interpreted. And you have to remember that when people interpret the Bible, sometimes they have to run it through their own filter, their own understanding, and pick a word that seems to fit that, and then put it in, and then, whether or not that's actually the proper way to understand it or not and sometimes it's left to the interpreter. And so then we sort of get what they give us, because like most of us don't read Hebrew, for example. Okay, but what it says here is that Christ is going to stand on the Mount of Olives, and the Mount of Olives is going to split in two. And then this remnant is going to flee through the opening. That this is a picture, actually, of what we read in Revelation chapter 12. And I don't know that I put it in my notes here. But in Revelation 12, it talks about the earth coming to the aid of the woman. Okay, that the dragon spews water out of his mouth, a flood. Okay, we know a flood represents an army or troops. He's going to try to overcome that remnant that's leaving. He's going to pursue this group of people that's leaving. He's going to gather together an army to do it. And then it says that the earth comes to the help of the woman. Okay, how does the earth come to the help of the woman? It's the same thing that happened when God was delivering the children of Israel. They left, and Pharaoh and his army followed. The sea was opened. The children of Israel passed through the Red Sea. And just as Pharaoh and his chariots were pursuing them into the Red Sea, the sea closed up on them, okay, and they drowned. They drowned in the sea, but the children of Israel passed through on dry land. Sea of death, land of the living. This is what's going to happen during the end times. The Mount of Olives is going to split in two. And Revelation 11 talks about there being a great earthquake. 7,000 people in the city of Jerusalem are going to be killed. A tenth of the city will fall. There's going to be a big earthquake. And the mountain is going to split. And Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, you're to flee. Go really fast. Don't go back and get anything, because that mountain is going to open and you're going to flee through it. And I'm going to lead you, okay, like lightning flashes from the east to the west. So will the coming of the Son of Man be in his day, right there. And they're going to follow him. And it's going to be, the valley is only going to be in existence for a very short time, maybe an hour, maybe less, who knows. And they're going to run through that opening, and the armies of Satan, the dragon, and the beast are going to pursue this remnant. And then almost as quickly as the earthquake opened the valley, it's going to close back up again. The earth is going to come to the help of the woman and swallow up the flood. And that's why Jesus said in Matthew 24 that don't go back and get anything, just run. It's going to be hard if you're pregnant, hard if you're nursing, hard if you got kids, to be able to move that fast, but you need to move quickly. All right. And then it says You will flee by the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains will reach to Azel. Yes, you will flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. And then the Lord my God will come and all the holy ones with him. Okay, I want to look at this last part right here. The Lord my God will come and all the holy ones with him. The Hebrew word that's translated as come here is a word that can be translated in all kinds of ways. So if you look it up in Strong's, you're going to see there's this whole pile of different ways that you can translate this word. It's a very common word. But this word come can also mean go or depart or bring or went. The phrase the holy ones there is kind of an unusual one too, and people don't really know what kind of holy ones we're talking about here. But this word for holy ones is used in Psalm 16 verse 3. And here's what it says. As for the saints who are on the earth, they are the excellent ones, in whom is all my delight. So it can mean these are approved people, excellent people. So if we were to translate the last part of Zechariah 14 here, last part of verse 5, in the context of understanding what we know about from Revelation 12 and the woman fleeing and those passages about the remnant in Matthew 24, this is probably how this passage should be translated. Then the Lord my God will depart and all the excellent ones with him. That is, those who have their names in the book, whatever that book is. What this means is that when the Lord returns to the Mount of Olives to collect the remnant of Israel, they will go with him into the wilderness to the place he has prepared for them. Okay, so you will flee by the valley of my mountains. Yes, you will flee just as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and then the Lord my God will depart and all the excellent ones with him. Okay, so that's for your consideration. The prophet Daniel wanted to know how long this terrible time of persecution of these holy people would last, these excellent ones. And the man clothed in linen, who is, I believe, an appearance of Christ before his incarnation, told Daniel that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. And the way we know this, that the day counts of Daniel and Revelation are literal, is because this one period of time is calculated using 3 different metrics. Okay, so we've got the words time, times, and half a time. We've got 1,260 days, and we've also got 42 months that we'll read about in just a minute. All of these are trying to say this is all literal. 42 months, 1,260 days, 3.5 years, time, times, and half a time. And that as soon as this 3.5 years was over, the smashing of the holy people would be done. Then Christ would return, and basically that would be the end. So let's just take a look at some of these passages that talk about this really bad time of trouble at the end. Daniel 7:25 talks about this man, the Antichrist person. He will speak against the Most High and wear down the saints of the Highest One. He will intend to make alterations in time and in law, and they will be handed over to him for a time, times, and half a time. Revelation talks about this. Revelation 13 verses 5 through 7. It's called the beast here. He was given a mouth to speak arrogant and blasphemous words and the authority to act for 42 months. Revelation 12:6, and the woman fled into the wilderness where God had a place prepared for her to be nourished for 1,260 days. In Revelation 12:14, but the 2 wings of the great eagle were given to the woman so that she could fly into the wilderness to her place where she was nourished for a time, times, and half a time, away from the presence of the serpent. Okay, so this same man who told Daniel that it would be for a time, times, and half a time actually has a name. It's Palmoni. He's the wonderful numberer. Okay, that is, he's going to give you the number of days and how long certain things are going to last. He's the same man who appears in Daniel 10 verses 5 and 6. I want to just read this. I lifted up my eyes, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen, with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the brilliance of lightning. his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of polished bronze, and his voice like the sound of a multitude. That's Jesus. Okay, we read that description of him in Revelation chapter 1. This same person who is described as a man here, and by the way, Gabriel is described as a man in Daniel. In Daniel's mind, this is a man, but Gabriel was a man too. He's described as the man Gabriel, but we know Gabriel is a spirit being called an angel. But what about this person here, this man? Well, this man is very different. Okay, he is very, very, very different, and he reflects the glory of God, and we identify him with Christ in Revelation chapter 1 and also Revelation chapter 10 verses 1 and 5. I saw another strong angel coming down from heaven, clothed with a cloud. The rainbow was on his head. His face was like the sun, and his feet like pillars of fire. And then the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised his right hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever. Christ is not an angel in the sense of that he's a spirit being like Gabriel or Michael, but he is an angel in the sense of the literal meaning of the word angel, which is messenger. Jesus is God's messenger. He is the fullest expression of God, bringing us the message of God in a person. Okay, and also in this passage in Revelation 10, we see him raising his hand to heaven, just like the man did in Daniel chapter 12, who raised his hand toward heaven and said that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. The first part of Daniel chapter 12 gives us details about that last half of Daniel's 70th week. And Michael is going to arise. We know Satan is going to be cast out of heaven at that time, and that's what initiates this time of trouble. And we know that there is going to be a remnant that flees. Zechariah 14 tells us Christ is going to return to the Mount of Olives. He is going to deliver everyone whose name is found in the book. He's going to leave, and the excellent ones will go with him. He is going to lead them with the wings of a great eagle, just like he led the children of Israel out of Egypt and through the Red Sea. And in this case, it will be through the valley of my mountains, the valley that's created when the Mount of Olives splits in two. So there is one more video I want to do on this, and this has to do with the day counts that we find in Daniel chapter 12, verses 11 and 12. And the day counts actually refer to Christ's first coming. Okay, the first part of Daniel 12, about the second half of that 70th week of Daniel, we're going to go back and look at the first half of that week in the last two verses of Daniel 12, verses 11 and 12. And this is a kind of a typical Hebraic way of doing things. So part one is A, and then we're going to talk about part B, and then we'll talk about part B some more, and then we'll go back to part A. So we're going to learn about the first half of the 70th week of Daniel. Then we learn about the second half. We're going to talk more about the second half, and then we'll go back to the first half of the 70th week of Daniel, that last 7 years before Christ's visible return when every eye sees him. Okay, so that's on the next video. Hope to see you then. Leave a comment, get a copy of the show notes, and we'll see you on the next video. Till then, have a blessed day.